How could an entire settlement consisting of hundreds of strong men and women simply vanish into thin air, leaving behind no bodies, no signs of struggle, and no notes? On August 18, 1590, John White stepped ashore on Roanoke Island, and instead of a thriving city, found only silence, grass-covered ramparts, and the word Croatoan carved into a wooden palisade. This disappearance became not just a mystery, but a turning point that turned an ambitious imperial project into a detective story of sand, storms, and human despair. We are accustomed to thinking of colonization as a parade of victories, but the story of Roanoke is a chronicle of the struggle against invisible enemies, where the main weapons were not muskets, but carpentry tools, and the ability to read the signs of nature. Here on the edge of the known world, the fate of an entire civilization depended on the strength of a single boat and the direction of the wind. The intrigue lies not in who killed them, but in the incredible, almost absurd decision they made to try to survive in complete isolation. Watch the video to the end to find out how one bureaucratic error in the Port of London doomed 115 people to a life that historians have been debating for 4 centuries. Want to know a secret that will change your understanding of how America began? The most important misconception concerns the composition of this expedition. They were not hardened soldiers ready to die for the Queen, but ordinary civilians, families, craftsmen, and farmers. Their goal was not conquest, but the creation of Raleighstown, an autonomous, self-sufficient settlement that was to become a new home, not a military outpost. John White, appointed governor, was not a general, but an artist and cartographer, a man who saw the world through the prism of creation, not destruction. This changed the whole philosophy of survival. They needed not just to defend themselves, but to build, sow, and establish a way of life in conditions of absolute uncertainty. Preparing for such a journey in 1587 was a logistical nightmare comparable to preparing for a flight to Mars today. Every inch of space on the ships was worth its weight in gold, so they had to choose between an extra barrel of flour and a box of tools. They carried bricks, tiles, seeds, and even dismantled furniture, trying to transport a piece of England across the ocean. But their main mistake was believing that they would be able to quickly establish contact with the local environment and obtain the missing resources on site. The organizers of the expedition, sitting in their London offices, painted idealistic pictures of fertility that had nothing to do with the reality of the sandy islands. The landing at Roanoke itself was the result of a navigational failure and a conflict with the fleet's captain, Simon Fernandez. The original plan was to establish a colony in Chesapeake Bay, where conditions were much more favorable for agriculture and ship mooring. However, due to the approaching winter and the sailors' unwillingness to risk their ships, the colonists were literally dropped off at the old location on Roanoke Island. It was a decision made for them, a decision that cut them off from deep water harbors and trapped them in shallow waters. The first days on the island were not spent relaxing, but feverishly rebuilding the remains of the old fort left behind by Ralph Lane's previous military expedition. They found that the old buildings were overgrown with wild vines, and the first skeleton of an Englishman they found was a grim reminder of the price of their mistake. They had to rebuild the stockade, repair the roofs, and clean the wells, working from dawn to dusk. It was exhausting work that required tremendous effort from people who had just survived a long sea voyage. Despite the difficult start, a spirit of cautious optimism prevailed in the colony, reinforced by faith in their own strength. Craftsmen set up their workshops, blacksmiths blew their bellows, and carpenters prepared wood for new houses. It was an attempt to impose order on the wilderness, to create structure and routine where chaos reigned. Every nail hammered and every seed planted was an act of affirmation of life. But food supplies were dwindling at an alarming rate, and reality began to seep through the walls of their hopes. It turned out that the seeds they had brought with them did not germinate well in the sandy soil, and the season for a full harvest had already been missed. They had to ration their food, switching to a strict economy regime in the first months of their stay. It is interesting to see how this topic is perceived in different parts of the world, because the story of people left to fend for themselves is understandable to everyone. Where are you from? Do you agree that sending civilians without military support was a mistake? Are you ready to learn the truth about why the landing site itself was a death sentence? Roanoke Island is located in the Outer Banks, a narrow strip of sand separating the ocean from the mainland, which sailors would later call the graveyard of the Atlantic. This location is characterized by treacherous currents, an ever-changing fairway, and sudden storms capable of smashing a ship to pieces in a matter of minutes. For a colony dependent on maritime supplies, choosing this location was a strategic disaster, as large ships simply could not approach the shore. The island's geography dictated harsh conditions. There was no deep-water harbor, and shallow waters stretched for miles around. This meant that any unloading and loading became a dangerous operation, using boats that often capsized in the surf. The colonists found themselves trapped on the island, like in a bottle with a dangerous sandbar blocking the neck. The soil on Roanoke was sandy and poor, unsuitable for the traditional English agriculture to which the settlers were accustomed. They tried to grow wheat and barley, but these crops required a different climate and different soil. Local plants thrived, but the colonists needed time and knowledge to learn how to use them for food. Fresh water sources on the island were unreliable and depended on seasonal rains. Wells tended to become salty during storm surges when seawater penetrated the aquifers. The problem of clean water became a constant headache, forcing people to spend precious energy searching for new sources or collecting rainwater. The forest on the island was dense and impassable, consisting of oak, cedar, and pine trees, which provided building materials but made movement difficult. Clearing land for crops or expanding settlements required titanic efforts to uproot stumps. Tools became dull and broke, and repairs in the field required ingenuity and skill. The climate of the Outer Banks was unpredictable. The sweltering heat of summer was followed by chilly winds in winter. High humidity contributed to the rapid spoilage of food and rotting of wood, as well as the spread of disease. People suffered from temperature fluctuations, having no clothing adapted to such conditions. In the next chapter, you will learn what incredible decision the leader made to try to save his people and why it marked the beginning of the end. What I am about to show you is forbidden in textbooks on ideal leadership, but it was the harsh truth of survival. On August 27, 1587, John White made the most difficult decision of his life. He boarded a ship to return to England for supplies, leaving his daughter, son-in-law, and newborn granddaughter on the island. It was an act of desperation, dictated by a general meeting of colonists who literally forced him to leave, believing that only his personal influence at court would ensure the rapid dispatch of aid. White did not want to leave, understanding all the risks of the journey and how it would be perceived. But the logic of collective survival outweighed his personal feelings. The colonists drew up a written petition, formally requesting him to be their envoy and guarantor of their return. This document was their insurance, proof that the governor had not fled, but had gone on a mission to save everyone. The departure was hasty and chaotic, as the ship's captain was eager to take advantage of the favorable wind and feared delays. White was given only half a day to pack, and he barely had time to say goodbye to his loved ones, not knowing that he was seeing them for the last time. Imagine the gravity of that moment, watching the shore recede, knowing that the people dearest to him were left there without protection or provisions. The journey back to England turned into a real nightmare, full of storms, accidents, and deprivation on board. White's ship was badly battered, supplies were running low, and the crew was on the verge of mutiny. The fact that they made it to port at all can be considered a miracle of navigation and human endurance. However, the worst was yet to come for White in his homeland. He arrived at a time when England was preparing to repel an attack by the Spanish Armada. All ships capable of going to sea had been requisitioned by the Crown for the defense of the country, and no private expeditions were allowed. The borders were closed, the ports were blocked, and one man's pleas to save a distant colony were drowned out by the roar of preparations for war. White found himself trapped by bureaucracy and geopolitics, watching helplessly as precious time slipped away. He used all his connections, reaching out to Sir Walter Raleigh, the colony's organizer, but even he could not go against the royal decree to mobilize the fleet. The interests of the state and the survival of the nation took precedence over the lives of 115 people on the edge of the world. In the winter of 1588, White managed to equip 2 small ships, but they were intercepted by French pirates, robbed, and forced to return to port. It was a crushing blow that meant the loss of another year and another opportunity. Hope faded with each passing month, turning the wait into torture. Watch the video to the end to find out what one single item White found when he finally returned, and why that item spoke louder than 1,000 words. Please like this video if you are moved by this story of human resilience. What if I told you that nature itself decided to destroy the newcomers before they ran out of food? Modern research on tree rings conducted by dendrochronologists in the region has revealed a shocking truth. The years 1587 to 1589 saw the worst drought in 800 years. The colonists arrived at Roanoke during the most unfavorable climatic period of the millennium, caught in a perfect storm of ecological disaster. This meant that their attempts to grow crops were doomed to failure, not because of a lack of skill, but because of a physical lack of moisture. The earth turned to stone, the springs dried up, and the local vegetation withered, depriving even wild animals of food. Hopes for self-sufficiency crumbled to dust under the scorching sun. In such drought conditions, relations with local tribes inevitably became strained, as there were not enough resources for anyone. The Indians themselves suffered from crop failure and could not share their supplies, even if they wanted to. The trade that the English had counted on came to a halt, as there was simply nothing to exchange. The colonists had to switch to alternative food sources, showing remarkable ingenuity. They learned to catch fish with woven traps, gather oysters in shallow water, and dig up edible roots. It was daily exhausting work for a handful of calories needed to sustain life. Diaries and reports from that time mention that people began experimenting with the local flora, risking poisoning. Through trial and error, they mapped the island's edible resources, passing this knowledge on to each other. It was real scientific work in the field, where the price of a mistake was death. The problem of dehydration was even more acute than the problem of hunger, as without water, a person weakens in a matter of days. They had to develop systems for collecting condensation and morning dew, using every drop that nature provided. Discipline in water consumption became the law, and violations were punished by expulsion or boycott. In the next chapter, you will learn how relations with those who had lived on this land for centuries changed, and how diplomacy became an art of survival. What would you have done in the colonists' place, knowing that famine was looming?
Our families are sick. We must reach the fort before the snows come.
The colonists' relationship with the indigenous peoples who inhabited the coastal areas and the mainland was a complex tangle of hope, mistrust, and necessity. Their closest neighbors were the Secotán and Croatoan tribes, who knew these lands better than anyone else. The fate of the Englishmen depended largely on their goodwill, especially in conditions of acute food shortages.
We must understand each other.
The Croatoan tribe, led by Chief Manteo, who had previously traveled to England and been baptized, showed the greatest loyalty. Manteo became a bridge between the two cultures, a translator and diplomat who tried to smooth things over and prevent conflicts. His role in the colony's survival cannot be overestimated. He was the only link connecting the strangers to the reality of the local world. However, memories of conflicts with Ralph Lane's previous expedition, which had behaved aggressively, poisoned the atmosphere of trust. Many local chiefs viewed the new settlers with suspicion, expecting them to trick or attack them. The English had to make a huge effort to prove that they had come in peace, and only wanted to trade and live alongside them. The colonists tried to establish an exchange of technology and goods. Metal tools and fabrics were exchanged for food and skins. Copper jewelry and utensils were highly valued by the locals, which gave the English leverage in negotiations. But the supply of goods for exchange was limited, and their value fell as the market became saturated. There is evidence that the colonists began to adopt local methods of construction and farming. They learned to build dugout canoes, weave mats, and use locally designed fishing nets. This cultural penetration was an inevitable process of adaptation, blurring the boundaries between civilized and savage. Diplomacy required constant attention. It was necessary to participate in ceremonies, exchange gifts, and observe complex rituals of hospitality. Any misunderstanding or breach of etiquette could lead to a cooling of relations or even a blockade. White and his assistants tried to behave as cautiously as possible. It is important to understand that the colonists were not a monolithic force. They were a vulnerable group of refugees seeking shelter. Their survival depended on the mercy and pragmatism of the Croatoan chiefs, and perhaps it was this alliance that became the key to their future fate.
Survival depends on it.
The Spanish fleet numbers over 100 ships, Your Grace.
We cannot spare a single vessel for those.
Are you ready for the shocking truth about why the rescue expedition was delayed for 3 whole years? The reason was not forgetfulness or malicious intent, but an event of planetary scale. The attack of the Spanish Armada on England in 1588 was the greatest naval battle of the century, requiring the mobilization of all the kingdom's resources and leaving Roanoke on the sidelines of history. Queen Elizabeth I forbade any ship that could be used for defense from going to sea, effectively locking White Island in England. 3 years is an eternity for an isolated group of people whose supplies were calculated for a few months. Imagine the psychological state of the colonists, who lost hope with each passing season. They knew nothing of the war in Europe. They saw only the empty horizon and felt that they had been forgotten. During this time, children born on the island grew up, for whom England was only a myth from their parents' stories. The structure of society inevitably changed, adapting to a reality where there was no external authority or help. Old ranks and titles lost their meaning, giving way to new hierarchies based on survival skills. It was most likely during this period of great silence that the decision was made to leave the island. Roanoke's resources were exhausted, relations with some neighbors were soured, and the walls of the fort did not protect against hunger. Staying put meant a slow death. Moving offered a chance. While in England, White never stopped trying to break the blockade, but each time he failed. He wrote petitions and sought investors, but the country was ravaged by war, and no one cared about a handful of people overseas. His personal tragedy unfolded against the backdrop of the national triumph of victory over Spain. When the expedition was finally approved in 1590, it was more of a search and rescue mission than a rescue mission. White sailed on the ships of privateer John Watts, who was more interested in Spanish booty than the fate of the colonists. The governor was a passenger on his own rescue ship, stripped of his command. In the next chapter, you will learn what exactly they saw beyond the walls of the fort and how a technical detail of the building revealed more about the fate of the people than any words could. And what do you think? Is 3 years of isolation a death sentence for any group? The most famous and mysterious legacy of the colony was not gold treasures, but simple inscriptions carved into a tree. Approaching the settlement, White and his companions saw that the houses had been dismantled and the area surrounded by a new high palisade. On one of the entrance posts from which the bark had been stripped, the word Croatoan was clearly carved, and on another tree nearby, the letters Kro. These inscriptions were not made in haste or panic. The letters were even, deep and clearly legible. This indicated that the departure was organized and planned, rather than a flight from a sudden attack. The people wanted to be found and left their address. The most important detail was the absence of a distress signal. Before leaving, White agreed with the colonists that if they were forced to leave due to danger or attack, they would carve a cross, Maltese cross, above the name of their destination. There was no cross above or next to the word Croatoan. This meant that the decision to relocate was made voluntarily, possibly under pressure from circumstances, but without an immediate military threat. This message gave hope that the colonists were alive and in a friendly place, on Croatoan Island, where Mateo lived. Inside the perimeter, they found heavy items that the colonists had been unable to take with them: lead ingots, iron tools, and even the remains of small cannons. Many items had been carefully buried, suggesting an intention to return for them later. This was preservation, not looting. However, White's own chests, which he had left behind 3 years earlier, had been dug up and ransacked, their contents scattered on the ground. Books, maps, and paintings had been damaged by rain and sun. This indicated that after the British left, other people had visited the site, probably hostile tribes who took whatever they considered valuable. The absence of human remains was another important factor. A battlefield always leaves traces, but here there was only emptiness. This reinforced the theory of a peaceful evacuation and resettlement. These marks on the tree became the only message sent through the centuries. They tell us about discipline, about a plan, and about hope, but they do not tell us what happened next. The Roanoke colonists did not simply wait to be rescued. They actively fought for their lives, using all the knowledge and skills at their disposal. We know that among them were blacksmiths, carpenters, bricklayers, and tailors. Their survival depended on their ability to adapt European technologies to local materials. They built houses not from stone, which was not available, but from wood, using frame technology familiar to them from their homeland, but with roofs made from local materials, bark or reeds. It was a hybrid style of architecture that combined English durability with Native American practicality. Blacksmiths reforged unnecessary tools and scrap metal into essential items: fish hooks, arrowheads, knives. Metal was their currency and their advantage. Keeping the fire burning in the forge required charcoal, the production of which became a separate branch of their microeconomy. They learned to work with local clay, creating primitive pottery and even bricks for hearths. Analysis of archaeological finds in other places from that period shows that the English quickly adopted local methods of firing ceramics if they did not have their own kilns. Medicine in the colony was a mixture of European knowledge of herbs and local recipes. Surgical instruments brought with them were used to treat injuries sustained during construction. But the main medicine was hygiene and discipline, which made it possible to avoid epidemics in the crowded camp. Clothes wore out, and they had to learn how to tan animal skins. Deer skin replaced cloth, and moccasins replaced boots. The colonists' appearance changed, and they became more and more like the locals, which was not only practical, but also helped with diplomacy. Survival technology is not just about tools. It's a way of thinking. The ability to see a piece of driftwood washed up on the shore as something useful for the home, or an unfamiliar plant as medicine. That's what made them true pioneers. There are many theories about the fate of the colonists, but the most plausible and fact-based is the theory of their assimilation into local tribes. Logic suggests that a group of 100 people could not survive on their own in isolation, but could have dissolved among thousands of locals, bringing them their knowledge and genes. The move to Croatoan Island was only the first step. It is likely that the group subsequently split up. Some remained on the coast while others went deeper into the mainland, following the migration of tribes or searching for more fertile land. This explains why search expeditions sent later from Jamestown heard stories of people building two-story houses and wearing clothes similar to English ones. Historical chronicles mention encounters with Indians with gray eyes and light hair, who claimed that their ancestors could speak from a book. These legends were passed down from generation to generation among North Carolina tribes such as the Lumbee, who still consider themselves descendants of the Roanoke colonists. Assimilation was not an instantaneous process, but a gradual integration into the tribal structure. The English could offer their metalworking skills in exchange for protection and food. Marriages between colonists and Native Americans cemented this union with blood ties, creating a unique mixed culture. At the end of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st, archaeologists began to find artifacts in Native American settlements of that period that clearly belonged to the English. Rings with coats of arms, fragments of slate writing boards and glass. These finds in places dozens of miles away from Roanoke confirm the migration theory. The very fact that they left no mass graves behind speaks in favor of life rather than death. They simply ceased to be English in the understanding of that time and became part of the New World in the truest sense. They adapted so deeply that they became invisible to history. In the next chapter, we will summarize and look at how this mystery influenced the entire subsequent history of colonization. The disappearance of the Roanoke colony was a harsh lesson for the British Empire, changing its approach to the exploration of new lands. The next attempt at colonization, Jamestown, founded in 1607, took into account many of the mistakes of its predecessors. A more protected location was chosen, more reliable communication with the metropolis was established, and the expedition was more militarized. Roanoke showed that luck and enthusiasm alone were not enough. Success required enormous resources, constant support, and a willingness to make long-term investments without quick returns. This failure sobered investors and politicians, forcing them to view America not as the Garden of Eden, but as a complex and dangerous project. The mystery of the disappearance gave rise to a powerful cultural myth that became part of American identity. The story of the Lost Colony reminds us of the fragility of civilization in the face of the wilderness. It teaches humility and respect for forces beyond our control. This story also raises important ethical questions about cultural contact. The fate of the colonists, who were probably saved by the indigenous people, is an alternative to the bloody history of conquest. It is an example of possible peaceful coexistence and fusion, which unfortunately remain the exception rather than the rule. Scientific interest in Roanoke has not waned after 400 years. Archaeological excavations continue using drones, ground-penetrating radar, and spectral analysis. Every shard found, every coin adds a touch to this picture, gradually dispelling the fog of mystery. We will never know all the details of what happened during those years of isolation. Any diaries that may have been kept have disappeared forever. But we know the main thing. The people did not give up. They sought a way out and found it, even if it meant losing their former identity. The story of Roanoke leaves more questions than answers, and that is what makes it so compelling. We saw how ambition collided with reality, how hope fought despair, and how simple survival became the greatest feat. These 115 people were not heroes in shining armor. They were ordinary people who found themselves in extraordinary circumstances. Their fate is a reminder that the edges of the map are not the end of the world, but the beginning of a new story. What topics or mysteries of history would you like to see in future episodes? Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new investigations.